Alright, so we've covered the basics for movement, we've covered the basics for blocking, we've covered the basics for attacks and poking at your opponent, and we've also covered some of your attack properties. So now, it's time to do math.
NANI?!
Well, not exactly, but there are numbers involved and you need to have at least the basic understanding of what those numbers mean. In general, your attacks have three parts: a startup, impact, and recovery. And each part lasts for a certain number of frames. Startup animations of frames is how long it takes the attack to come out. Impact or active frames are how long the attack has an active hitbox to hit the opponent. And recovery animations or frames are how long it takes after the hit for your character to go back to a neutral standing state. Now these numbers of frames can change depending on if you hit the opponent, if they blocked your attack, or if you whiff the attack completely. Now something super important that I want you guys to remember here, there's 32 characters in the base roster for Tekken 8. Each one of them is going to have like 100 moves in their move list. That's already over 3,000 moves. But there's moves that aren't in the move list. For example, 112 is generally the first thing you find in Kazuya's move list. But here's the thing, 1-1 isn't in the move list. And neither is just a single jab. But all three of those moves have their own separate amount of frames. So suddenly, instead of each character having about 100 moves, it's now closer to 300 moves per character. Which means in total,
It's over 9,000!
that is a lot of fucking numbers to remember. So instead, we focus on the startup frames, which tells us how fast or slow a move is, and we focus on what the recovery frames are, if the attack gets blocked. And as for your plus frames and negative frames or minus frames, that basically tells you who recovers first. For example, a jab on block is +1. It means that I'm going to recover first, and 1 frame later, the opponent is going to recover. But a double jab, that's -1 on block, which means my opponent recovers first, and then 1 frame later, I recover. And the more negative something is, the longer it takes for the recovery animation to end. So what's fast and slow in Tekken? Well, that's hard to say exactly. For example, Kazuya's forward 3 is a 20 frame move. It has 20 frames of startup. 20 frames is pretty fucking fast, but then you realize a jab is 10 frames. That's twice as fast. And a jab is generally the fastest thing that your character has. So we use that as the baseline. 10 frames being the fastest, and the more startup frames a move has, the slower it is. So up close, when you're moving around and poking at your opponent, you want to use fast, safe moves. Fast moves, like your jab, or in general, a down forward 1. A down forward 1 is usually around 13 frames or so. That's only 3 frames slower than your jab, but it's still pretty close to those 10 frames. So as you're moving around, you're going to open up some space between you and your opponent. At that point, you can use the so-called slower moves a bit more freely because there's less of a chance of you getting jabbed out of something. But remember, some moves have evasion, like Kazuya's down 1+2. This is around a 22-ish frame move, but that evasion can help make up for it being slower compared to your really fast jab. Also, you can do that with Kazuya, which is pretty fun to throw out every now and then. So now we have a general understanding of how fast or slow a move is in Tekken. So what is safe and unsafe? Well, again, we base this off the jab. If a jab is generally the fastest thing you have at 10 frames, that means anything that is -9 or lower on block is a safe move because the jab won't be able to punish it. For example, Kazuya's Demon Paw. If you block that, Kazuya's at like -8 or 9, so he's safe. But as soon as we hit -10 and above, we've reached unsafe or punish ranges because a jab will be able to punish at -10. And that is your absolute basics for safe and unsafe moves. If something is -9 or lower on block, it's safe. If it's -10 and above, it's unsafe. However, there is a bit more you need to remember for your general frame rules in Tekken. -1 to -3. Moves that are -1 to -3 on block are safe, and it means that it's still your turn in a sense because you can still move around pretty freely at -1 to -3. So your pokes like jabs and stuff like down forward 1s are generally -1 to -3 on block, which is why you're able to do stuff like jab into sidestep down forward 1. -7 to -9. Moves that are -7 to -9 on block means you've basically given up your turn essentially. So, for example, Demon Paw with Kazuya. You're still safe because you can't be punished by a jab, but you don't recover fast enough from that move to keep poking or moving around. Another awful example of this is Kazuya's down forward 1 is in this -7 to -9 range, which is why we don't ever use that as a poke. And if we do, it's once or twice. Now what about -4 to -6? Well, moves that are -4 to -6 on block, those are kind of in a gray area between your other frame rules. You're still safe, and you haven't really given up your turn, but if you try like sidestepping or doing something, you may get clipped by a move. For example, if you're -4 and you try to push a button against Kazuya, he's gonna hit you with one of these and it will be a counter hit, which is gonna be freaking devastating. And now we get to our punish ranges and frame rules. -10, -12, and -15. -10, if a move is -10 on block, for example, Kazuya's Wind God Fist is -10 on block, that means it's jab punishable. That's why your jab has more to the string. For example, 1-1-2 with Kazuya, a 10 frame punish. -12, at -12 you use your 12 frame punishes, or in Kazuya's case we would use an 11 frame. Remember, just because something is -12, it doesn't mean that you have to use a 12 frame move. You can use a 10 frame move if you want to, as long as it's faster than what your opponent is negative. For example, you just look at the numbers. -12 versus 10. It's going to work. -15. At -15 and above, so -16 and so on, those moves are launch punishable on block. So in general, your down forward 2s, if your character has a hop kick, the hop kick will work there as well, or some other launching move will punish at this frame range. But remember, these are general frame rules, meaning in general a lot of unsafe moves will be -10, -12, or -15 and above when you block it. But what about -11, -13, and -14? Well, those are still a thing. For example, Kazuya's forward 3 in general is -13 on block. But remember, there are exceptions to the rules, which is why these are general frame rules. For example, Kazuya's Wind God Fist. At its fastest, that's a 15 frame move. So if launch punishable is -15, that's going to launch, obviously. But what about the electric? The electric at its fastest is a 14 frame move, which means Kazuya technically can launch you at -14. But Kazuya also has something special called the perfect electric Wind God Fist. It's specific to him. It's the fastest version of an electric at 13 frames. So theoretically at -13 Kazuya can launch you. It's just, that's ridiculously hard to do. Even launching with an electric at -14 is pretty hard to do, so you don't see that shit happen often. So because of these general frame rules, it's good to learn and remember your 10 to 15 frame punishes, so you can punish people with them when you block stuff. For example, I know all of Kazuya's ones just because I play him very often. 10 frame, 11 frame, 12 frame. We have a new 13 frame now in Tekken 8. 14, 15. Also remember, the more negative something is on block, the more options you have to punish with. Now we've been talking a lot about safe and unsafe moves and punishing those unsafe moves, but those were all high and mid attacks. What about low attacks? Well, with lows, we apply the same general rules, but the numbers change slightly. Remember those wild standing moves? I told you those would be important at some point. In general, your fastest wild standing move is 11 frames. It's your wild standing 4. So lows that are -10 or lower on block are safe lows, and lows that are -11 and above on block are unsafe lows. And you need to remember your wild standing moves to punish those unsafe lows. And remember in the last video, I told you to try and remember your move animations when you're going through the move list. You don't want to mix up your hell sweep with your wild standing 4. Well, recognizing animations does serve another purpose as well. Because you don't recognize a move by its input or its frame data, you remember its inputs and frames by recognizing its animation. For example, Kazuya's down forward 2 in a match. You don't see frame data or the inputs, you just see this. And that is what you are reacting to. You are reacting to the move. And when you see the move, that's when you remember, That's Kazuya's down forward 2. It's a 14 frame move that's minus 12 on block. So if I blocked it, I punish with an 11 frame or a 12 frame. But keep in mind, over 9,000 moves, that is a lot. And you're not going to learn everything overnight. Even these videos, they're just here to help you get started with the basics in a sense. But learning everything will take time. And since it's going to take time, you should take your own time. Learn stuff at your own pace. You do not need to learn everything all at once. Take your time and have fun. Now, unfortunately, I did not get to pre-order Tekken 8, so I'm going to miss out on all the day one hype. Maybe if I didn't buy MK1, I could have bought Tekken 8, so I'll probably only get the game like maybe late on Friday or Saturday or something, which means I gotta be wave dashing my way around spoilers for like 2 days. That kind of sucks. Anyway, if you liked, leave a like, dislike if you didn't, and maybe I'll run into some of you online. And remember, you have a sidestep for a reason. Use it!